Hello and welcome to CybrGen Compliance Talks podcast, the podcast where we speak to leaders from across the technology and compliance space with the aim of reframing the conversation, the narrative around compliance and what it means for small and medium businesses. Really shifting the narrative and the conversation from compliance as a checkbox to compliance as a growth enabler. My name's David Loader. I head up growth here at CybrGen and I am your host. Today, I'm joined by Bob Sampson, who's the combined CIO and CISO of the RVM Group. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Great to be here. Thank you.
Bob, before we get stuck into the main topic of conversation today, which is cybersecurity and compliance as a business growth enabler, can we begin with a bit of a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure. So I've been in security and designing secure systems and networks now for over 25 years. And subsequently, I've got all the alphabet of letters after my name saying I've done it and been there and seen it. So hopefully I know something about what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And talk to us a little bit more about kind of the RVM Group.
So the group is fundamentally a commercial and industrial freeholder. We own sites across the UK. There's 26 sites on the portfolio. But those sites are essentially large estates, industrial estates, commercial estates. And within the group, we have multiple businesses that are essentially making use of those estates. So we have Braze Solutions, which is a logistics and warehousing provider. We have Wrest Park, which runs a series of business centres around the country, serviced offices, similar to the Regis model, only better, of course, I have to say. In general, Wrest Park is providing offices for businesses from literally one-man bands up to maybe the larger ones are sort of like maybe 50 seats maximum. So very much in the SME market. And what you see is across all those businesses, a good few hundred across the country, a broad spectrum in terms of their maturity and awareness of their risk within the cyber world. So we have, think of it like this, big organisations, take the military, for example. The military does not make every single nut and bolt that works on every single tank. These come from outside suppliers, aerospace companies, BAE Systems, etc. And often they are not making every single bit. That's being offloaded to specialist companies who do niche products, printed circuit boards, etc. that still fall under the defence banner, but are not they themselves actually part of the Ministry of Defence, the Army. So you get these small niche companies that make small, very sort of like specialist products, but are still governed by the requirements put down by the Defence Secretary as to what requirements have to be met to supply into the British forces. And because of that, they have a very mature approach to it because they're essentially part of this much bigger organisation. So they are going to be adhering to the same levels that the companies like BAE Systems are going to be. However, you then have the one-man accountancy firm. He's doing outsourced bookkeeping. It's just one person. He's got a laptop. Small businesses, other small businesses, friends he knows send them their accounts, and he just does a bit of tax firm, etc. on his laptop. He has no maybe massive oversight of to what he has to do to protect it, and maybe he's gone off and bought that laptop from PC World or something, and he just thinks he provides great service, and maybe he is, but how much thought is he given to have I got the right antivirus on? I've got like a local software firewall on. How am I protecting my network? So you have this big spectrum from small businesses that can be very security aware and very aware of the compliance and governance requirements on them, to the other end of the spectrum where, and very literally, I dealt with a company recently in Wrest Park. I go around often and give like talks about an issue within security. I pick something, I talk about it, and then people come up and ask me questions afterwards or just pick my brains on things. And I was dealing with a company about basic levels of security, talking about things like going out and getting cyber essentials, and they were essentially sharing. This company was sharing CVs of people. They were sort of like a recruitment agency. And they're like, we didn't realise we should protect everything. And their machines had no antivirus. They had no passwords to log on to the machines. There was no multi-factor authentication. A lot of these things are very easy and, importantly, cheap to implement, because a lot of small businesses will see they have in their head that security is wildly expensive. But you can get a multi-factor authentication thing that will cost you maybe £2 per month per machine. Most businesses can afford that on a machine, but they had no multi-factor authentication even. So if that laptop was stolen, one of their devices was stolen, you could walk away with the entire contents of that business, and all that data's gone. And there was no protection. In their case, I think it was probably a bit of ignorance about how valuable their data was, because a lot of people don't realise when they're handling data all the time, because they think about it in, if you like, a good way, in a non-criminal way. They look at their data and go, it's not worth anything. It's just, it's something. But if you look at it from a criminal point of view, you would think this has value, because all data has value. So they're maybe on one side a little bit ignorant of the value of what they're doing. Can't see the wood for the trees, maybe. But also they are maybe unaware of the any governance that applies to them within their sector. Maybe it hasn't been clearly communicated to them. And again, it's part of saying, well, have you gone out and looked? What is, are there things that would apply to you? And there are. In their case, there was some things, and I managed to sort of like find it for them and point them in the direction. Hopefully they've gone away and are acting to secure their systems.
So it sounds like in a large part it's an education piece, and you talked about the talks that you're doing as part of the kind of the Wrest Park to helping educate people. Once educated, how can you get that kind of aha moment or that paradigm shift that businesses think, actually, yeah, I'm not too small to start caring about this?
There's a couple of points which I think we cement it in their mind. I suspect I'm the catalyst to make them think about it in the first place. The place I typically point them to go and look, first of all, if they're a member of any accredited body, go and speak to that body and see what they say. Because very often, if you're a member of a governing body within your industry sector, they will have guidelines as to what you have to do. And it might be buried away in page 360 of the document you got when you joined, but it's probably in there. So, go through, find it, and see what their expectations of you being a member of their organisation, what they expect you to do, what they expect you to adhere to and comply with. The other thing is to look at things like, even your insurance company may now be putting greater levels of expectations on a business. So, for example, one of our businesses, I forget which one it was, a couple of years ago, our cyber insurance was very literally 2 or 3 sentences, a short paragraph in an otherwise large insurance document. And I can paraphrase, it was like, you have £500,000 of insurance. That's it. There was no requirements on us to do anything. There was no expectation. It was just like, as part of this policy, you have £500,000 of cyber insurance. And then last year, that one paragraph became 34 pages. And now it says, you are expected to do this for us to, give you this coverage. And it very much represents a shift and an awareness from the banks and insurance companies' point of view, because up to now, they have been covering an awful lot of shortfall of insurance. Companies are experiencing some level of fraud, ransomware, etc. Some form of like cyber exploitation where they're losing money, and they're going to their insurance company. Up to now, the insurance companies have been paying out, but the insurance companies they're not stupid. They're not just going to keep paying out willy-nilly. So you're starting to see these requirements within your insurance that you adhere to a certain level of security. To use the car analogy, and I can always make a car analogy, I can turn everything into something about cars. If you talk about insurance terms of your car, your insurance expects that your car is roadworthy, that it has an MOT, and even if it's after the MOT, it still is roadworthy, that the tyres are within tread depth, that your brakes function, etc. If you go out in a car that's brand new, perfectly working, fully roadworthy, and you have a crash, happy days, your insurance won't have a problem. But if you go out and you buy an old car, you have it MOT, 9 months later the tyres are bald, the brakes have got no brake pads on, they've got almost no stopping power, the suspension is shot, there's oil leaking everywhere, it's all over the wheels, it's sliding everywhere, and then you go and have a crash, Your insurance company is going to turn around to you and say, you are not keeping your vehicle in a roadworthy condition. We are not covering you because, this is an expectation on both parts. We expect you to not be driving unless the vehicle is kept in a roadworthy condition. And you're starting to see this on cyber insurance. The insurance companies are starting to come out and say, we expect you to have certain levels of certifications that have been audited to show that you are playing ball on your part. It's the same as like your insurance company probably won't be impressed if you leave the front door wide open when you go out and someone comes in and nicks your TV. The expectation is you are shutting and locking the front door. So the expectation with this is that, if you want to be trading, you want to have that cyber coverage, that you are doing things now. A very common one that we're seeing is things like, you must have cyber essentials, because it is a very simple way of, at a very basic level, saying, yes, we have got decent passwords. Yes, we don't let, anyone just access the firewall. It's been set up in a way and it's blocking incoming connections. Yes, we have a policy about what happens in this instance. And Cyber Essentials is a great first stepping stone on the route to like a good, comprehensive, mature security policy. And it's a good place where a lot of insurance companies are starting and saying, look, if you want this coverage, we want you to prove that you're doing things, correct, that you're keeping your vehicle roadworthy, to use that analogy. So they're saying, go and get Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus where it's audited. And then we know that if you have an incident, that we know you have invested the relevant time, money to protect your business at a fundamental, at this level. And there's the line, and you have gone beyond it. So again, it's a case of when I do these talks, is saying, look, are you aware that Cyber Essentials is out there? Are you aware of what your insurance company? Have you looked at your insurance policy and said, what does it say about its expectation on you? What does your bank say? Because banks are where you're holding your money. They're doing the transactions for you. What do they expect? Because they might turn around and say, we expect you to have this. And again, we will not cover you or we will not allow you to trade if you don't have a certain level of protection on those devices. Governing bodies, membership accreditations, memberships, your organizations you're affiliated to, insurance companies, banks, any of those are places to go and see what is the level of expectation for your compliance. What do you need to do to achieve that level of governance where you can say we're operating at a safe level? Often what it is, from my point of view, is saying, aside from the banks and insurance, which is applicable to everyone, what organizations you're a member of, what industry sector are you in? And then you can go, well, if you're in healthcare, you're going to need to go away and look at HIPAA and stuff like that. And pointing them in that direction. And that way it gives them a starting point that they can go away. And usually when you say, look, the information's out there and actually readily available, but it might be hidden in documents you haven't readily, read all the way through. You got the document through as a big PDF. You looked at the first page and went, oh, okay, well, that's fine. I'll refer to it if needed. And then, it's got filed away somewhere. So it's mainly about going, look, the information's there. You need to go and find it. You need to be a little bit proactive on these things because it's a bit like being proactive, keeping your car roadworthy. You can't wait for the crash to then go, after the crash, I'd better go and change my tyres. You have to change the tyres and get them, decent tread depth before you have the crash.
So it's really that kind of paradigm shift of kind of making it proactive and shifting up that list of priorities.
Yeah. So I don't want to sort of dwell on the misfortunes of others, but there is something beneficial that, everyone can look at things like with Marks and Spencer's, Jaguar Land Rover, high-profile attacks that we've seen in the last year, is the fact that it hits the national news and it becomes, everyone becomes aware of it. And, you look at Marks and Spencer's, those guys are very, very good. They invest a huge amount in their security and they still got hit. They're not resting on their laurels. And I'm, without knowing the specifics of what they do at JLR, again, I would lay money that they're doing it very, very well. But you can never be 100%. And it shows that even they can be hit. They can be targeted. So if they can, with the amount they spend, it brings to the sort of public consciousness that this is something that can affect anyone. And it is a fallacy to think you can actually protect against it because security is a piece of string. It's a spectrum. You pay your money, you move further down that spectrum to protect more and more. But the thing is, at this end of the spectrum is someone like China or Russia. And with the best will in the world, you can't protect against them, because if an American NSA can't protect against them, your 200-person SME isn't going to protect against them. But what you can do is every business can look at guidelines issued by places like the NCSC, and go and get these easy sort of to adopt frameworks like Cyber Essentials, where you can easily easily adopt the practices, and you can go to best practices for all these different things. And if you're doing that, you're reducing the risk. You're not completely removing it. There is always risk, but you are reducing the risk of it happening. Again, it's like if you have good tires on your car in winter, you're going to reduce the risk of a crash than if you have bald tires. And this is all risk management. It's always about going to the business saying, what is your risk tolerance? How much, how much uptime do you want? How much downtime do you want if there's an issue? Are you happy with a week offline whilst you fix a problem? Does it need to be a day? Does it need to be an hour? And they are going to then, those timelines are going to reflect back and dictate to a certain degree what measures you put in place, not only from the security, but from the resilience the other side that allows the business to get back on its feet quickly after an attack. Because it is a fallacy to think it's not going to happen. It's not if, it is when. If a business always has in its head that an attack is going to happen at some point in the future, so you reduce the risk with the things you put in advance, Cyber Essentials, whatever you want to do there. But then you also invest in things that get you back on your feet after it happens. Things like a decent backup system. Something that you can be 100% certain that if you have an outage, you've been taking backups, you've been testing those backups, they work. So if you have an outage, you can go, well, that's a pain. However, I can wipe the systems, I can recover from backups, and within a day, we'll be back to where we were. And we've lost a day's trading, but in the grand scheme of things, it could be a hell of a lot worse.
Compliance doesn't guarantee that you're impenetrable, but it guarantees or ensures that you're more likely to get underwritten. You're able to get cyber insurance. And I guess in the instance that you gave, funnily enough, I know TCS, JLR, and M&S do all have internal security teams. I've helped kind of recruit for some of them. So I know they have these robust teams, yet they've still got hacked, to your point. Now, if you're the service provider or you're someone in the supply chain that's being the open gate that has allowed someone to get in and, do that sort of damage, and you're a small business who hasn't had the adequate security controls in place, that's going to be enough to put you out of business, assuming you haven't got the kind of insurance in place. So I guess really looking at it from a business enabler standpoint, the compliance for these small businesses is allowing them to do business with larger organizations who are becoming increasingly scrupulous of their supply chain and supply chain security, and allowing you to kind of protect yourself. So if anything does hit the fan, you've got some kind of cover and some support there.
Supply chain security is massive. And one thing that we like to do when I talk to people, I not only talk to our customers, I talk to our suppliers. And I talk to, partners in the industry who we work with. Because from our point of view, protecting ourselves means protecting that supply chain, up and down that supply chain. Whether it's customers or whether it's suppliers, these are people we interact with and we send data back and forth to. So it's one thing to protect ourselves, but, we buy paper clips from someone, and that's an invoice that's coming in digitally. And if that invoice has been corrupted or, interfered with in some way, then that is putting them at risk, and it may put us at risk. So therefore, have that conversation with them. What are you doing? And it doesn't have to be an aggressive conversation. It doesn't have to be like, you have to go and get this thing or we won't trade with you. It could be a very mutually beneficial conversation to say, look, where are you? We want to keep you working with you. You want to keep working with us. But we need to be on the same page. Are you aware of this? What have you got in place? Can we give you some advice? Can we point you in the right direction? Because that makes them more secure. And, exactly what when we talked earlier about, the smaller businesses that supply to the bigger businesses, that supply to the great big businesses that supply to something like the MOD. Those very, very small niche businesses at the end that supply very specialist products still have to feed in. They still have to be covered by the the governance of the larger organisations. But part of their own business security and the longevity of that business is making sure that not only can they recover from an attack, but that they've done enough to make sure that if they have an attack which then affects a business down the chain, that they supply to, that they don't come back and go, well, hang on, we are obviously going to question you now because we've had an attack that originated through you. And because of that, it would be irresponsible not to have that discussion and say, look, what have you done to protect it? And if the small business at the end there can say, look, we have got all these things in place, we adhere to these frameworks, we've got these accredited certifications, you can, as a customer, go, well, you know what? They were unfortunate. And if you're mature about it, you go, this can happen to anyone. We've tried to protect ourselves. They've had a problem. Hopefully, we've stopped it ourselves. But you accept the fact that it can happen. However, if you had a small supplier and they had a problem and you had to respond because that problem maybe became your problem too, even if it didn't go anywhere, you may still have ended up having to spend time and resources investigating it to make sure it didn't actually become a proper security issue. If you found that supplier had not put anything in place and they had a problem and it very easily propagated to yourself, you would look at that supplier with a maybe a less than friendly sort of eye, because you'd be going, well, you're our supplier, you are expected to be doing something to protect yourselves, you haven't, and in doing so have endangered us. And when you talk about security being a business enabler, by proving that you are doing these things, you can go to potential trading partners and go, look, we are responsible, we are mature, we're trying to be aware and proactive in how we deal with these things. Proactive doesn't mean going out and spending millions of pounds on every single cyber product out there, because it is long as a piece of string. You can keep spending money indefinitely. There has to be a cut-off. And one of the things that when you talk about compliance is there has to be a limit as to how much you're prepared to spend. And that will obviously be dictated by any number of factors, like the size of your business, the requirements upon your business, the nature of what it is you're actually doing, whether there's, how sensitive that data or the intellectual property that you're generating is. But realistically, you can spend as much as you want on security and resilience, and adhere to every single framework available globally. But realistically, what you do is you say, we are trying to be responsible. We will pick a line in the sand. We'll say, this is what our budget's going to be, and we'll spend that budget responsibly on these things and try and make a concerted effort to be secure, proportionate to what we do. And that is it's about a maturity model where people have looked at this and they've had that iterative process. They've looked at it, they've considered it, they've applied it, they've looked at the effects afterwards and, how has that worked out? Do they need to go back and change anything? But that is a mature model. If you're dealing with a business who are looking like that, you would feel very comfortable that they were a good and reliable trading partner. Whereas if you get someone who comes in and you go like, why didn't your mail filter catch this? And they say, what mail filter? You're at some point going like, we either need to have a conversation, or maybe that is a point against you when you're dealing with another business who says, yes, we have this mail filter. Every email I get from them comes up saying it's been scanned by Mimecast or something. You know that when you go in there, they have, if you visited their site, they've got appropriate physical security locks on doors and things. And, the server just isn't sat out in the middle of the office that anyone can go by and tap away into. It's the vibe you get. It's whether you've asked your due diligence of any partner as to, what do you have in place? What certifications do you have? How do you approach this? And it's about having a spirit of openness. It's about being, not being afraid to go up and say, look, this is important to us. We want it to be important to you too. Show us what your approach is. And I don't think it should be a dirty conversation to be had. It should be something almost at the beginning of a partnership should be like, this is how we operate. We have customers we're responsible to, and we would like you to show that same level of concern for our data as we show for our customers' data. And again, it's about securing that supply chain. And if a business goes into a negotiation with that mindset that, we are open, come and talk to us about security. We're proud of what we've done. We think we've done this responsibly. And, if someone wants to give us advice, I mean, I think I'm good at what I do, but I'm not perfect. People can come and tell me I'm right, I'm wrong. They can praise what I've done, or they can say that, oh, have you thought about this? I'm happy to have that conversation. But whether I'm good or bad, I will have that conversation. I will stand against what I've done. And if someone wants to say that, we need you to adhere to this, that becomes part of the negotiation. It's like, okay, well, that's going to cost us X amount to implement. Is it worth it for the contract? Will we, by implementing this standard from another country, maybe that allows us to tender for other work from businesses from that country, for example. But it's about being proactive. It's about seeing security as something that needs to be baked into what you do as an operation. In every aspect of the operation, we look at every process. Where does security fit? Where does compliance fit? How can we make it work? How can we keep it within budget, but make it something that literally allows the business to carry on functioning and makes us look like a responsible partner to anyone we're working with.
But I think the kind of overarching thing is there's such an asymmetry or asymmetric information when it comes to security, that you've got the security folks who hold all the information. They know why security and why compliance is important. But I guess to the rest of the business, it's what's the ROI? Linking that back to insurance, reading some stats that was saying businesses that have Cyber Essentials Plus compliance are 70 to 80% less likely to make an insurance claim. Brilliant in the eyes of the insurance company. We're going to underwrite their risk because they're so much less risky. So the insurance companies want to underwrite more risk. More businesses obviously want cyber insurance, but because of this asymmetry existing, it's like we need that bridge between the SMEs, the education piece of this is why security is important. It's not about security and compliance for compliance sake. It's because security and compliance equals insurance, equals getting you in a room for these bids and these projects that you're going for. It also equates to trust. At CybrGen, we've now kind of changed the name of what we're building. We call it the Trust Operating System, because SMEs understand trust. When we talk about security and compliance, people usually go kind of blurry-eyed. So I guess the question to you is, how do you think on a more kind of macro level we can be, aside from these sort of podcasts, be helping businesses understand the value of security and compliance in the context of the business outcomes?
ROI is a very difficult thing to talk about when you talk about cyber, because you are talking about insurance. Go back to the car. I pay £500 a year to insure my car. I paid £500 a year every year for the last 10 years. It's £5,000. Never claimed on it. Now, I could look at that and go, what's the return on that? I've thrown away £5,000. At no point in the last 10 years have I made a claim on my car. I've never made a claim on a car insurance. I'm 49 years old. So, 31 years of driving, I paid insurance and never claimed on it. What's the return on that? Nothing. But the actual return is there. It's just that it's less physical. It's more esoteric. It's the fact that you are covered. You can operate knowing that if something happens, you are covered. Yesterday I went and had 2 new tyres fitted on my car because it had its MOT done. And, they come back and they say, the front 2 are getting a bit low. And I was like, well, that's fine. I do a lot of miles. Just get them changed now. So tyres have changed. So I know that I'm covered. I've got, my vehicle is roadworthy and my insurance is in place. And now when I go out driving, I'm not sitting there with, this thing in the back of my mind going like, what happens if? However, the problem you have with small businesses is that they're incredibly cash sensitive. They are, they won't go and buy a stapler if they don't have to. Because a lot of them, like many, almost universally across small businesses, the cash flow isn't there to allow them to go and spend willy-nilly. So it's very easy for them to see an ROI where they say, if we buy X and it has Y return, great, that's something they can understand. But maybe when you say, look, it's very hard to say, if you go and get this accreditation, your insurance will drop. Well, that's something they can work out, and they can have that conversation with their insurance company in advance. And the insurance company may say, yes, we will drop your premium by 10, 20% if you go and get this. And that gives them something to offset against it. But there's a lot of feeling, I think, that if you even want to go and get Cyber Essentials, you have to pay a very expensive consultant to come in who will be there for a month and will charge you, 5 figures for what they're doing. And that puts a lot of businesses off. And the reality is, the message is that even something as simple as Cyber Essentials, is not beyond the grasp of every business. And it's written in a way that everyone can read it and go away and look at it. And yes, you might need to get someone to come in and give you a bit of advice. But again, one of the things we do through Wrest Park is, because we are essentially a part ISP because we're providing the internet connection, and part MSP because we're providing the firewall, the routers, the internet access, the wireless access points, etc., and all the security to the buildings. When people do their Cyber Essentials, we get involved with them because a lot of the questions there we have to answer. And again, it's something I love this. I want to do this because they are protected, and in protecting themselves, they are more likely to stay viable as a business for longer and stay a customer of ours where they can stay in the business centre for longer. So it's in our interest to help them. I am not about gatekeeping this information. I'm like, I will talk to anyone they want to talk about it. I love security. I think it's fascinating. So if someone wants to come to me and say, look, we have this, how would we go about this? I will have that conversation every day. We'll go through it. We'll talk about how they can do it, what might make it better. I can point them in the directions of where they might need to go to talk to the people who can help them. I'm not really in a position to do it for them, but I'm very much happy to aid them in that process. And where we need to, we will answer questions for people and say, look, we are providing this bit. This would be how we would structure the answer for it, so they can get that compliance and get that protection. Very much from my point of view, something we want to go and do. We want to give our customers, our tenants, that protection, that information. And the thing is, it's very organic. A lot of this information permeates through small businesses through osmosis. There's a lot of local chapters of small business groups where people go, and these are the sort of conversations that will come up. And all it takes is for one business to go, what we just did, our Cyber Essentials, and we thought it would be terrible, and actually we did it. It was very simple. We could do a lot of it ourselves. We didn't have to pay someone to do it. The questions are written in a very easily accessible way. There's a bit, and this is a slight bugbear of mine, is that there's still people, it's 2026, there's still people who go, oh, it's technical, I don't understand computers. And it's like, you know what, that argument works in 1995. It works a bit less in 2005. And, we're 2026. It's like to say I don't understand computers when you're, almost every single person is carrying around a smartphone. You've got a smart TV that's, doing that. You've got tablets and laptops everywhere. Yes, I can understand there might be the odd person who does not want to engage with technology, but realistically, in this day and age, a business has to, because you're filing all your taxes online these days. You have to engage electronically, which means a responsible business has to engage with the things that come with that technology. In the same way, you can't buy a car and go, I don't care about how a car runs. I don't know it needs the tyres changed. I never knew tyres wore out. I didn't know I had to replace the oil in the engine. That is irresponsible car ownership. Sitting there going, oh, I just bought a laptop, I don't know have to do anything else, is arguably at that point irresponsible business ownership. So most businesses these days are very open about having a conversation, because they may not know that they don't know something, but they're prepared to go away and find out. And once one does it and finds out that these things are actually quite easy to do, they will go away to their sort of like their peers, friends, business, local chapters of business groups, etc. And there's hundreds of those everywhere, all around the country, where businesses go, they meet up, they have those discussions, and it only takes one to go, you know what, that wasn't as painful as we thought it'd be, which is wonderful. And there's always going to be someone who sort of like sits and goes, oh, we don't understand that. We're not paying for someone to do that. It's like, those are the ones who are going to find that security at that point, they're going to get shoved to the sidelines because they're not engaging. They're not protecting their business. They're not making it look attractive to future partners. And, again, those businesses will unfortunately organically get pushed to the sidelines as other businesses take the business because they are operating in a responsible, mature way.
And as we wrap up and bring it back to, we've uncovered a lot of kind of areas where compliance we've kind of proven is a business enabler, particularly for these SMEs. For businesses who, are actually a little bit more bullish and a little bit more kind of positive about compliance and want to embark on the journey. I know there's this whole kind of alphabet soup of all different kind of compliance frameworks they can adhere to. What would your kind of takeaway advice and recommendations be for those small businesses who are looking to kind of embark on their compliance journey? What's the best kind of standards or frameworks to start with, in your opinion?
By far. So, right, we're very lucky in this country. We have the NCSC. You can go on their website and you can look at the NCSC's website, and they'll give you advice to different businesses, things to do, basic steps, and almost immediately the first thing you come across is Cyber Essentials, which in the grand pantheon of all these different frameworks, it is a brilliant step for a small business. It's written in English. You can read it. You don't have to be techie to read it. You can read it as anyone go, you know what, I can implement 3/4 of this just because I've read it. And it goes, you should have a cybersecurity policy. You should have a passwords policy about how long people's passwords should be. You go, that's easy. We will have a password policy that says people must have, 14-character passwords, and it must have 3 of the 4 character sets of uppercase, lowercase numbers, special characters. Easy. There's your policy. I mean, it could be written on the back of a Post-it note. It's so simple. That is not complex. That one thing there is one section of Cyber Essentials ticked. Password policy. It is easy to do. All you have to do is read it. So it makes this fantastic first step that business can go to. And then obviously the next step after that is Cyber Essentials Plus, where you get an external auditor to come in and verify what you've done. That's probably the one way, if you're touting for business, having Cyber Essentials Plus and saying that we've been externally audited and found that we're not lying on these things, that's great, because it means that you can prove to other businesses that you've done what you've said you've done. And again, if you're a small business, that's going to be reasonably cheap. It's not going to break your bank, because the cost of Cyber Essentials scales with the size of your business, and the cost of that audit is going to scale in response to how complex your business is. So if you are a small, 5-man accountancy firm, that's going to be quite cheap, to get someone to come in and audit you, because it's going to be a very simple Cyber Essentials policy set. But it is the first step. After that, you're looking at things like, go to your governing bodies or any organisations that you're affiliated to and have that conversation with them, because it won't be the first time they've had that conversation, and they'll be very happy to advise you. And all it takes is a phone call and email and say, look, we're an affiliated member of you. What are your expectations for what, how we should handle cybersecurity in this industry sector? And they'll point you to a website, go and look at this document, go and look at this standard. At this point, there's a myriad of different standards out there. And like you said, it is an alphabet soup of all these different ones. Some are applied to you at a national level, like GDPR, Data Protection Act 2018. They will apply at a national level for how you operate within your data privacy within the UK. And obviously, by extension, Europe, if you're going to GDPR. But also, there will be things that are specific to your industry. But have the conversation, because no one is, there's no stupid question. If you're prepared to pick the phone up or write an email and say, to these bodies or to your, whichever, to your insurance company, for example, and say, what are your expectations? And then assimilate this information and have the conversation with people who've been through it before. Very few businesses don't know other businesses in the same sector and have a cordial relationship with one or two where they can pick the phone up. Maybe in the past you've gone, you know what, I've had a customer come to me, I've got no capacity to do this, but I know Joe Bloggs down the road, next town over, does it. Go and speak to him. Maybe you pick the phone up to Joe Bloggs and say, look, what do you do? We're going through this at the moment. What have you done? Have you got any pointers? Can you recommend someone who will come and audit us? Can you recommend someone to speak to? And this is how it works. Have the conversation, be open about it, speak to your insurers, speak to your banks, speak to your governing bodies, speak to your membership organisations, speak to other businesses in the same sector as you. Have the conversations, because the more you do it, the better that information you're going to get, and you're going to build a picture of what you need to do. And then that will dictate where you go from there. I think Cyber Essentials applies to everyone. I don't think there's a business that will sit there and go, that's not relevant to us. It is the first step, but it's an easy step, and it's one that everyone can adopt. After that, have the conversation, go out, be open-minded, speak to people. Don't be afraid to say, look, I'm ignorant, because no one expects a business to understand everything about this. A business understands what it makes, what it sells, the service it provides. They're experts in that. So don't be afraid to say to someone, look, this is what we do. We make widgets. We know we're really good at making widgets, but we don't really know how to protect ourselves and our intellectual property about making widgets. So, can you help? Can you give us some advice? And you'll find that, again, you'll get this information in. It's about information data gathering. Build that picture, speak to people, and be open. Because, again, the more you are open as a business, the more that as a country, if you like, there's all these different organizations, the more we have this spirit of openness and cooperation, collaboration, and trying to make sure that only we, but our partners and our supply chains, as we've talked about before, are also protecting themselves as a country, and eventually as a global economy, we become more secure because of it. Because the threats aren't going away. They're going to stay there. They'll get more complex. They might grow in size, might lessen in size, but they're never going away. So the more we as a global group of businesses protect ourselves, and the more open we are about talking to each other about it and saying, how can we do this? How can we make it better? The more likely we are to, overall do better in the long run.
Gotcha. And I guess on the topic of collaboration, as cliche as it sounds, people talk about security as being a culture of security, or particularly in the topic of cyber resilience. You need to build it across teams. It can't just be the security or the tech silo. It needs to be a whole organization thing. And from a business development standpoint, if you're looking to expand into new territories, into different industries, understanding the compliance requirements proactively is a good way of enhancing and more efficiently kind of growing the business than relying on a more kind of reactive approach.
Yeah, no, one thing you said there is really important. Security isn't only the responsibility of the security team or the IT team, or whichever department's handling it. Security is responsibility of the whole business. So it needs to be baked into the processes, but also be baked into people. It needs to be baked into the consciousness of the business, and that everyone looks at something they're doing with like a small part of their consciousness going like, are we doing this in a secure way? We regularly send out emails to our employees just to keep them alert. If there's new alerts out, there's new things that threaten the business, so that they're aware of it. A good example, Bray Solutions, we are shipping goods all over the world, so we're getting shipping notifications from the likes of DHL, DPD, etc., all day, every day. The shipping notification scam is a very old one. An email from DPD saying had a missed shipment or whatever, click here to rearrange it, and actually it's some form of malicious website it's taking you to, and that's a route in for ransomware, whatever. So we have people who are dealing with those type of emails and shipping from overseas, who might be dealing with a courier company in another country who don't speak your language, so you've got language barriers there, etc. So they have to be very aware of, is this something suspicious? And it's wonderful because, I love the fact that our guys regularly, like multiple times a day, are sending us an email going, is this legitimate? I've seen this looks funny, I don't trust it, can you check it for us? Happily. All day, every day, we'll check something we think is, if someone raises it as a flag, because it means they are doing it. They're doing our job for us. They're working with us. People are your weakest link if they're not trained, if they're not sort of switched on. But if they are their strongest link, they're part of that security apparatus. They're as valuable as a firewall, because they're sitting there, the end users, you've got a PC, and the PC's running antivirus, but the person's running the antivirus up there. They're switched on, they're looking at what's happening and go, I don't like the look of that. I'll send it off to someone to check before I go and action it. Wonderful. Every day, I'll take that. Having that security mindset, baked into the consciousness of a company and the processes and how they operate as a business, that's the way to do it. So again, it's making it not a taboo subject, is making it sort of like a very open dialogue within the business, and sort of like inter and intrapersonal relationships like around different organizations.
That's the next podcast episode then, the human firewall.
Absolutely.